Welcome to another edition of Ramblings Around the Kitchen Table with Rabbi Andrew and rebbetzin Kelly. We'll be studying 105 today. Go ahead, rebbetzin Kelly.
Well, good morning. Today we're focusing in on Psalm 105, which is a very interesting psalm because of the way it's structured, where you have this whole sections that are all about praise and celebration and actually details of how to uplift or magnify the Lord. And then tucked in that is this very precise legal document. And it's very interesting because I don't hear it cited very often. And I was interested in that. We still have people on the earth who I don't believe that the numbers are growing. I believe the honesty and people are being open about what was always going on wrong inside of them. I don't believe that the numbers are increasing. I believe that they had a dark spot and a profound vacancy. There's like a space, like a dark closet that they had with empty space in it. And, you know, when you have a vacuum, anything will fill it up. Because the way the Lord created the universe and the earth, the system that he created does not favor a good outcome, does not tolerate vacuums. If there's an open, empty anything, creation will fill it with something. And we know that, right? If you create a vacuum in a container, or think of a box or something, or a refrigerator, like we have the refrigerator in the congregation, and whenever the door was closed and there was no air going into it, the front panel of the refrigerator would collapse and get pulled in because there was a vacuum, and the only way to stop it was to open the door. Why? Because the air would go in and equalize the pressure, right? So it's a metaphor, it's an example where I believe right now what we're seeing is that metaphor of, everyone's got a vast cavern, like the size of the Grand Canyon, a hole in their heart. And the only one who can fill it, the only one capable of filling such a huge space is the Lord. Everything else will fall short. So you'll spend a lifetime throwing lesser things into the vacuum, trying to fill it up. Because the way the Lord created the universe, it is a standard or a law where the vacuum can't stand. Creation can't tolerate it. Your heart can't tolerate that hole. And so you'll try to fill it up with anything. And so people try their career, money, hobbies, drugs, alcohol, people, they'll gather people around them, and, they can't tolerate being alone for 5 minutes, So some people need to have a crowd around them, but they get exhausted at some point in their life if they keep down that road, and they start realizing that everything sort of makes it feel better for a little while, but then you need a little more and a little more and a little more until you finally wear out and you're left with, I'm still feeling empty, So that process is really important. And I think because so many people have not been introduced to the Lord, and they were told that there's really some doubt whether the Lord exists anyway, so they don't seek him. And I think we have more of that going on, much more of that. And when you are not guided by the word, which we're going to do right now, when we're not guided by the word and the Lord isn't filling our hearts, right? The darkness and because what happens without the word? You have no wisdom, you have no intelligence, you don't have true history, you don't have data to work with, you got nothing. So the darkness will consume you, and then you get, Israel has no right to exist. This is where it leads. The Jewish people are chosen, but I don't believe in that, so therefore they're open for attack, right? So now we have all these people saying that Israel has no right to exist, they're on stolen land, all this nonsense.
Okay, so how does that fit in with Psalm 105? Why
So what we have here,
during the passage,
starting from verse 6 to 11, this is documenting the Lord's perspective on what is true about the land, what is true about the chosen people together in one block. And there's a lot of that people trying to dissect, separate God's people from the land, from the government, and it's all a game because the Lord doesn't see it that way, and it's very plain here. So I'm just going to read it, starting with verse 6. You, descendants of Abraham, his servant, you offspring of Yaakov, his chosen ones, he is Jehovah, our Elohim. His rulings are everywhere on earth. He remembers his covenant forever, the word he commanded to 1,000 generations. The covenant he made with Abraham, the oath he swore to Yitzhak, and established as a law for Yaakov, for Israel as an everlasting covenant. To you, I will give the land of Canaan as your allotted heritage. So in just this stanza, it's all there. Everything, the names, the people, who he's talking about, there is no confusion. There is none. It cannot be made any more clear. Who exactly are we talking about? Oh, who's a Jew, right? So we have that, who is a Jew? And are these really the Jews? And, and then, well, you're on trespassing on lands where, land was taken from, from the so-called, air quotes, Palestinians. And what I love about this is driving it home, where we've got names and exactly the land, we know where it is, and this unchangeable, it's a law, it's my judgment. And what also came to mind to me was, we remember the conversation that Jehovah had with Abraham. Well, he was Avram there, I think. I'm not positive on that, but I think he was Avram there, where he said, you're going to be in Egypt for 400 years. And after...
It was Avram, not Abraham.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. So the issue there was, the key element to it is, there's all these people living in this land. And he says this one line that touched me the first time I read it, because it's so important. They will be ripe for punishment, and I'm going to send you in. Again, we go back to his rulings, his judgments are everywhere on earth. So here's Avram. He's not in the land. He's having a conversation with the Lord, but he hasn't arrived there. He's not a stranger wandering around even. And there's this incredible, Avram doesn't even know these people, but Jehovah's telling him, oh, I know these people. They're going to be ripe for punishment. Oh, they've been, when our mothers told us as a kid, keep it up. Go ahead, keep it up and see what happens, right? The Lord was having this relationship with the Canaanites and all those other tribes that were in the land, where he says, oh, I'm going to give them the opportunity to do the right thing, but I already know where they're headed with this. I already know what's going to go on. And that's where you come in. Because when they wear out all of their opportunities, I'm sending you in because they're going to need it. They're going to be punished. They're going to be removed. And I'm sending you in, and that's going to be my dwelling on earth with you guys. So again, that's a judgment call that the Lord is making because he's the only one qualified. He's the only righteous one, right? Where on earth, scripture tells us, the Lord's looking for someone righteous, and there's no one. There's no one righteous. No one's trying to do the good thing. They're all full of sin. How can he say that? Because he's the judge. He's the Zaddik. He's the one that can make that judgment according to his laws. And if you would just read that definition for that line in verse 7, his rulings are everywhere on earth. If you could read the meaning for that word, rulings.
Okay. In the NASB, it is the word for judgments, his judgments. It is the word
Strong's H 4941. Mishpat. Mishpat.
And that means, mishpat means, it means judgment, justice, ordinance. Judgment, act of deciding a case. Place, court, seat of judgment. Process, procedure, litigation.
So that's, it's also a big hot topic. They're falling away from it now. It's not as viral on social media the way it was a couple of years ago. Like recently, a year or two, where we have the social justice and we have total and obvious corruption of judgment in America. It's rampant. It's in all the states. There's judges who don't apply any of the laws that are written down. None of the Constitution matters to them, right? So we have this corruption of justice. But what's interesting is we have this one sentence: his judgment, his rulings are everywhere on earth. So that includes America. So we like to point to, well, we have the Supreme Court, right? So you can keep appealing a process all the way up to the Supreme Court. And in our minds, the way it works is the Supreme Court is a group of judges, but once they call it, everyone has to back down, whatever side they pick. So if you have corruption going all the way up, and for a while, the Supreme Court was ruling based on the Constitution until recently. And now we're seeing some of the Supreme Court justices are being pulled. We don't know how they're being pulled or pushed, but they're no longer doing their job.
Well, it comes down to a set of values.
Exactly.
If you do not have the Bible as your value setter, where the rules are explained right very simply there, it wasn't made for college students. The Bible is made for people who are slaves, non-educated. Okay? So when you don't have the Bible for your standard, then as it says in Yehoshua and Joshua, every man will do what's right in his own eyes. And that means, some people can say having sex with animals is okay, and some others will not. So it all depends what you hold as your standard. And that's, what they agreed upon when they wrote the Constitution was what a standard was. What is a woman? She has ovaries. Okay? Men do not have ovaries. You cannot be a woman. Okay? They can't implant them. So it's a standard. So what is a man? What is a woman? When you do not have the Bible as a standard, but not just the Bible, but in your life using it. We got these men, Pete Hegseth doing it, saying that, he's a good man, he's a new believer, he's on fire, he's in the military, so I'll cut him some slack with the American military with not having a beard. But other parts, are you keeping the holy days? Are you keeping the Shabbat? When you don't have that standard, then everything is up to you what you want to do. So that's what the Bible gives us. If you have that as your standard, then it's okay. If you don't, then the Quran could be your standard, Buddha's writings could be your standard, the Pope could be your standard. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, follow His commandments.
Amen. So what I find interesting here is we have this statement where I was going with the Supreme Court is we do have a Supreme Court, and that's the Lord. And there's some other references to people who have demonstrated their devotion to the Lord and His Word, right? Then sitting in judgment in the future, it's coming, where there'll be people sitting in judgment. And where I'm going with, it's like a Supreme Court concept, which may have influenced the setup that our founding fathers put in place, right? But because you see that, where there's these incredible...
Well, it definitely was an influence. The Bible was definitely an influence because you read John Jay's writings. He's the first Supreme Court justice, the high justice. He was a pastor. He was a teacher of God's law, and he wrote in the first law school in America. He wrote, any law that we write as a government must be held up against the standard of the Bible. That's John Jay. So when you don't have that,
right,
everything's a free fall.
Right. And so specifically, the Lord sits as judge. And, there's this setup where there's going to be others set in a place of judgment as a lower court system beneath the Lord. But the only way they get into that position was they already demonstrate reverence for the law, the precepts, the judgments that are written in the context of the Torah, So that's the only way you get on that seat, is that you've spent a lifetime, not, they recently converted. No, you spent a lifetime sitting and passionately and consistently following whatever the word says, and you don't compromise. Even when it's hard for you, even when you have to make tough decisions, the word guides everything you do, not your emotions, not your energy level, but it's always the standard by which you make decisions and you make your own, personal judgments, right? So that's the only way you get on that team to begin with. So I was just fascinated by this very condensed stanza of Psalm 105 where the Lord lays it all out. Now, you can confirm these verses in multiple other books of the Bible and scripture verses. This gets confirmed. But here it is, written in one document, like when you sit and you have to sign legal documents, right? So you and whoever you're working with, you and your lawyers and them and their lawyers, and here's the document, and we're all signing it, with witnesses and doing all of that, right? So here's the document right here.
Well, the key is verse 7, where you're pointing it. He is Jehovah our Elohim. His judgments are in all the earth. That verse there shows that in all the earth, all the earth, that means everybody is held to the same standard.
Right, exactly.
Israel is the light bearer to bring the Torah to the nations, as according to what Elohim said in Yeshayahu, Isaiah 42.
Right.
They're to bring the law to the nations. And when Yeshua, our Mashiach Nagid, said, you are to be a light to the nations, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, making them disciples first. They have to be students first, then you baptize them, for you crazy Christians. Okay, they have to be students first. They have to graduate from kindergarten to understand what they're doing. So, verse 7 is clear, kol, in all the earth. That means everybody's the same standard.
Yeah, and we don't go...
Because Torah is in your heart. Because God knows what's in your heart.
Well, if Torah is in your heart, you're in good shape, you know?
Well, you have to ask yourself this question. Are you a descendant of Adam and Chava? That's Eve. If you're a descendant of Adam and Chava, then Torah is in your heart because your daddy bit the fruit.
He was held accountable, wasn't he not? And then there's this whole, the next, where is it? 12 verses
You
12 to 15.
12 to 15.
Verse 12 to 15. This is details that we need to just put like in your brain, arrange this on the bookshelf, that this is beside what the document, the deed.
Absolutely true.
Right.
When they were only a few men in number, very few, and strangers in it, and they wandered about from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another people, he permitted no man to oppress them, and he reproved kings for their sakes. Do not touch my anointed ones, and do not touch my anointed ones, and do my prophets no harm.
Yeah. So here, what I'm looking at is, again, the Lord is looking at this gigantic picture, and we have to get on his level, looking down on the earth from where he is, because you can get, to a point where you don't see the forest for the trees. You're enmeshed, you're surrounded, and right now, like, the whole earth is filled with the fog of war, so you really can't see straight. Everybody's talking.
Too.
I'm sorry?
Prophet Joel.
Right. And so we're kind of in that condition right now. And so...
Yeah, the church wants to jump to chapter 2, Joel chapter 2. You got to get to chapter 1 first, guys.
Yeah.
And we're talking about chaos. Everybody's talking about chaos. Well, when a quarter of the world gets removed from war, famine, and plague, there's going to be chaos. Okay, go back to what you were saying.
So there's this important piece in this. Again, going back to his judgments apply everywhere on earth.
Verse 7.
You can't get away from it and say, well, it's not for me, because, I'm Chilean. I'm Korean. None of that, I'm from the Congo, none of that matters to me. I'm Canadian,
Definitely doesn't matter to him.
Yeah. So, well, it doesn't matter. You can't escape from the reality. And there was
It's like David writes, where can I go where you can't find me?
Right. Now, that's in a very specific sense for a person. That's written from a personal. Now we're backing up and getting a broader view about nations and the way the world is set up. And I remember, years ago, I guess 2008, 2009 maybe, being interested, where there's this man who established the website Sighted Moon, Joe Dumont. And I remember reading, he was the first one that focused in on sighting the moon in America and in North America. He's Canadian, but zealously guarding the Torah and the idea that the Rosh Chodesh actually means something to the Lord, and why does everybody avoid it? But what got me was...
Why are we still going to be doing it in heaven?
Yeah, and so all of this is the idea that he pointed out. If you look historically where the Torah was planted and established historically. Because the Lord says his word had to go out to all the earth. His word had to go. Before Yeshua comes back, everyone's going to be given an opportunity to read the word. So we had to have all these people for centuries translating the word into all these languages and missionaries going out and delivering the word. But where it took place initially and got grounded and was foundational in the culture, and those places have been held accountable to the Torah ever since it got planted there. And what he did was he made a timeline and he goes, watch this. And he kind of, yeah. So what he did, what was interesting was the man was given a vision of making a timeline for all these countries to see, is it true? Is it true that once the Torah got there, they were held accountable to it? And so he went over wars and famines and, chaos in the government.
Blessings and curses.
Blessings and curses, and everything, including the Shemitah, including just mapping it all out with unbelievable detail. I don't know. I have patience, but I don't have the patience that the Lord gave this man to go into the granular little details that he did. I couldn't handle it. I would be exhausted. I'm like, okay, I'm done now. And he kept going. And what he found was that places like, all the Western European nations, the United States, Canada, he went over places where the Torah was available to them. They read it. They understood it. They had, it was taught there, and so ever since the Torah arrived there, from that moment, moving through history, they were held accountable for it. And I think he even included Australia in that.
Because there's another concept that you have to understand there. Yes, Torah is in our heart. But once the written form comes, the Torah, it's the terms for peace. It's a written form. It's a declaration of war. The terms for peace. The Torah, the written Torah comes, sent out by Yeshua and the Talmudim, the disciples, or even the Hebrew people going around the globe, in the diaspora. So once the written document gets here, that's the terms for peace.
Now, I'm relating it to what we're reading here because there's, again, the judgments are everywhere on the earth. So don't think because you're in Russia. See, in Russia used to embrace the scriptures. They had people there that read the whole Bible, the Tanakh, Brit Hadashah, they can try to avoid it, but, so then we're going over in this next stanza, 12 to 15, where don't touch my anointed ones or do my prophets harm. So then everywhere that the Jewish people were scattered, which was part of the Jehovah's plan all along, the Lord was watching, how do you treat my people? And so what do we see, right? George Washington becomes the first president, and we have it documented that there was a huge percentage focused community of Jewish people in Rhode Island, one of the original colonies, and he writes a letter and saying, well, not under my watch, you'll be fine here. You'll be, no one's going to persecute you. So we get the first president early in his administration writing a promise to the. Now, why would he do that? We're being told, the the founding fathers really weren't believers. They all this garbage about, they were really deists and that none of them really believed. Well, the only place that George Washington could get that from was the scriptures. So he's somebody that would have been able to read this, right?
Let's just talk about that for a second. What they're pulling it from is the denominations. Denominations are not of God. God wants your heart. He wants your faith. He wants you. Yeshua said, "Follow me." The Messiah said, "Follow me." He didn't say, "Go make a new form of Judaism." The Messiah is the fulfillment of what we're waiting for. Okay, so when you got Protestants and Catholics and whatever, Lutherans and Dutch Reform, that's all man-made stupidity, and it's demonic. Because verse 7 says, what does 7 say again? It says, He is Jehovah our Elohim. His judgments are in all the earth. You're going to be judged on what he wrote, not what man wrote, not what the Lutherans wrote, not what the Reformers wrote, but what he wrote. And if you're not keeping the Shabbat, the Sabbath, you're not getting into his house, because Yeshua said, "I'm going to make a place for you at my Father's house." Go ahead.
So what we see is George Washington, the only reason he would know to do what he did was from the scriptures. And verses like this, I'm not saying he quoted this. What I'm saying is this is just one of many other places where it's very clear that you're held accountable to this word. And by the way, where that was what united the colonies, was what you just said. And I want to go back to that because it's super important. They themselves had to recognize that they were united in the Lord in spite of their denominations. They recognized that every single one of the colonies had a different denomination, but that we could be united because we all had the same Bible. Because they did. They didn't have the NIV, the NASB, the CJB, they didn't have any of that. They had one Bible. And they were blessed to have it. Right? So how did they unite? Well, yeah, because we all have a Bible, don't we? And we all have, the ability to read. The colonies were filled with educated people, which is not true on the earth today. There's, millions of illiterate people. They can't even read a Bible, even if you gave it to them. Where the United States was filled with literate people. They were reading their Bibles. And it was remarked in history this was the first time. They were educated.
And it's so sad because the books that they began to teach with in the schools was the Bible. Here we have, I forgot where it was. There was a story this morning where the idiot judges said you can't display the Ten Commandments. We'll take the judge out and hang him, okay? Just hang him. Because he doesn't believe in God. He doesn't believe in the Bible. So yeah, we are propagating a religion. That's what America was founded on.
But we were founded on a religion, so there's nothing wrong with that.
And he said, that's proselytizing. Yeah, well, it is.
Yes, I know. Thank you.
You're very correct. So if you don't like it, leave.
Yeah.
Or we'll hang you, okay, because you're a witch.
You can go to anywhere else and be secular and be, or there's places where they do all kinds of witchcraft, and you want to go have a good time, We'll see how that works out for you. So I don't want to get this too political, but what I'm saying is that the colonists came here and there was division of types because each colony was a different denomination, but they were able to come together based on the word.
Major on the majors, minor on the minors. Yeah.
And so, there's one God who created everything. His son, Yeshua, died for us. We all agree on that, don't we? So let's start there, and then we can all just get along, I think it's really important because they understood, don't touch my anointed ones. Don't touch my people. If you show mercy, you show love and companionship to my people living among you, that's in the Lord's mind, it's very similar, right? If you bless Israel, that's a form of blessing that touches the Lord's heart. It doesn't mean that, they were bringing tributes and things to them. It was just you're going to be among us. And we know that you're there. We recognize you're there. We're not ignoring that. But because of the scripture, you're going to be treated with the same laws, there's not going to be separate laws that we apply to you only and all of that. You're going to be equal to everyone else here. Now, he goes into what are these righteous judgments, right? So 16 to 22, he goes over how he applies this judgment, this justice.
And he called for a famine upon the land. He broke the whole staff of bread. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They afflicted his feet with fetters. He himself was laid on irons, until the time that his word came to pass. The word of Jehovah tested him. The king sent and released him, ruler of peoples. He set him free. He made him lord of his house, that's Adonai, and ruler over all his possessions, to imprison his princes at will, that he might teach his elders wisdom.
Now, we don't have time for this, but this you could do a whole separate conversation about what's going on here and the foreshadow of Messiah, the foreshadow of what we're living through straight through until days. Because the whole Joseph experience in Egypt, when he becomes ruler and all the other nations come and he's ruling over them, this is a big deal to understand the process. What did you read about? There was something about in the definition of Shabbat, right? It's like procedures and process.
Yeah, it's a whole way of living.
Yeah.
It's halakha.
But the judgment doesn't just come based on the Lord woke up in a bad mood this morning. There's standards and there's procedures where we discuss and we argue and we evaluate the evidence in front of us and everything from words you said and decisions you made, and he's going to judge you based on those things. It's not just a snap decision based on, you weren't born in Israel, so I'm going to treat you differently. His rulings and the law and the procedure on how you are judged, it applies everywhere.
Because it says in Torah that you will judge the rich and the poor with the same type of standard, because justice is blind. You're going to rule on what occurred.
So here he calls on a famine on the land, and he basically broke off the food supply chain, right? And they took Joseph away before that, right? So there he is.
So the famine, well, it's saying in verse 16, and he called for a famine upon the land. Then 17, then Joseph is mentioned.
Right, but we know that the famine happened while he was in Egypt. We know that anyway from the account. Mm-hmm. So the idea was that the Lord sent Joseph ahead, right? And Joseph is a foreshadow of Messiah, of the chosen people not recognizing their own Messiah. He's flesh and blood to them, but they don't see him. It's a whole other lesson to go into. But
you should go to before Pesach. Yeah, that's what leads to Pesach. Yeah. When you forget your covenant, when you forget who your people are, when you forget your God, then bondage happens.
Now, there's this whole idea where Joseph is then risen up in power, even though he was rejected by his brothers, and the idea of him. We kind of stop at the Pesach where, there's the leaving of Egypt, but we don't get into it at the Pesach about just how much power Joseph actually had. Where without an army, without a faction, there was no coup attempt that Joseph did. The Lord, raised him up, and he found favor with Pharaoh, where he was equal to Pharaoh in Egypt. It's insane when you think about it. Like, who is this guy? He gets here and he's in a prison and he's a servant and, all of that.
It was a Joseph lobby.
And so he takes over Egypt because the Lord anointed him for that purpose, to demonstrate the Lord's own power. That was the whole point. And Joseph, acknowledged that, he was given wisdom and information, and it went far beyond Pharaoh's dream, because you see, he was calling the shots, and he was making deals with these Goyim leaders, because they're like, we're starving, what good is our lives? We'll give you everything. Just give us food, And they wind up being under Joseph. And it's a good thing. It's a blessing for them. They're not being under an oppressive regime and being thrown in prison and tortured. They see it as a blessing because, well, at least we're alive. And this guy, he's not trying to hurt us. He's helping us. So, they're terrified of starving to death, and they lose everything, but they gain life. And that's the essential thing. They lose.
And it wasn't Joseph doing it. It was Elohim doing it.
Right.
Because he said, I'm going to bring a famine upon the land.
Yeah.
Now it's a famine of knowledge.
Yeah.
Hosea.
Yeah. So this is a big psalm, but the rest of it goes on where the Lord sent Joseph, the Lord sent Moshe. How many times, right? Where the Lord sent a man to lead, but these men that he lifted up feared Jehovah, were humble, were able to be in that position only because the Lord raised them up. They were not, again, they weren't running around with a sword in their hand and, threatening people, and none of that happened. These men were lifted up because their heart aligned with everything the Lord said. Their heart was already aligned and hungry for the word and looking to him for instructions, guidance, anything, help. They looked for help from him. And I'm just it goes through the Pesach, this psalm. And I just want to find the verse. And then we get to, I'm sorry.
What verse?
I think that's 39 there. If you'll read 39 and 40.
39 and 40, Psalm 105, verse 39 and 40. He spread a cloud for a covering and fire to illuminate by night. They asked, and he brought quail and satisfied them with the bread of heaven.
So we get to this point where his people have a cloud and a fire. Now, we often talk about them leading, right? That's how they got led. But that cloud and that fire was initially right when they were leaving Egypt, right? There's that very tense climactic moment where Pharaoh and his army get blocked by the cloud and the fire. And the Lord looked out. We remember the Lord looked out from the fire and made eye contact with them. And, the horses were freaking out, and Pharaoh's army was freaking out. There's this intense moment where he literally was a firewall. And this was in the middle of the Lord's blessing them, right? There's this battle. They had to trust him. And
Israel had to trust him.
The Israelites had to trust him. They were put in impossible situations so that they could learn that the Lord's not going to fail them. So he would allow them to see very almost devastating moments. Oh, we're all going to die. And then they don't. and he stands there, physically a barrier to manifest his power right in front of them, right? So that moving forward, there could be this trust, right? Which we know doesn't work out so great because they keep fading into doubt later on. But so here he was being this firewall and guiding them and being a provider. And so for us, there's going to be this, it comes in cycles. There's going to be these tense moments for us right now. They're coming after us. There's going to be, there has to be a trust. You cannot please the Lord without faith. We know that. You cannot please him unless you trust him, unless you have faith in him. So I'm just going to jump to, where are we? 43 to 45.
And he brought forth his people with joy, his chosen ones with a joyful shout. He gave them also the lands of the nations, that they might take possession of the fruit of the people's labor, so that they might keep his statutes and observe his laws. Praise Jehovah.
Yeah, this is really important. It's a statement of purpose. Why was he doing all of this? What was the point of all of this? So there was joy, celebration, praising of the Lord, and we know that that's documented. And then, just like he promised Avram, the Goyim that were in the land, right, were ripe for punishment. They get subdued and kicked out, so that his people could possess the land, and it was already prepared for them, right? Just like Yeshua said, I'm going to prepare a place for you, a house for you. That's why I'm going ahead of you. My Father's house, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm preparing a place for you. So here, these pagan people prepared a place for his people to come. They didn't have to plant the vineyards. They were already planted. I mean, to mature a vineyard, that takes a lot of time. I mean, and a lot of work. It doesn't just happen easily. It's not like, Bloomberg. Oh, well, you just plant a seed and, it's not real. No. It takes skill and it takes a lot of work and a lot of time. Once it's done, once you get that vineyard planted, once you get the orchard going, it's magnificent. But, it takes a very long time. You can't eat the fruit for 5 years, So it takes a lot of faith, right? But it was already produced. Why? The last verse. For me, in order to obey his laws and follow his teachings. That was the whole point. That was the whole point.
When you do these things, you will be blessed. That's the key. That's the key of the promising, the blessings and the curses. If you do them, Deuteronomy 28, verse 1 through 14, you'll be blessed. Then verse 15 says, if you don't, then other things are going to go on.
So that's, like I said, this psalm, there's whole stanzas that, we didn't get into because it's just crazy. There's so much information here and you can't do it all in one sitting. But what got me was the very beginning, verses 1 through 5. It starts out with this praise, this, incredible, give thanks, call upon his name, make his deeds known among the peoples. And then again, here we go. Sing to him, sing praises to him. Talk about all his wonders. Glory in his holy name. Let those seeking Jehovah have joyful hearts. Seek Jehovah and his strength. Always seek his presence. Remember the wonders he has done, his signs, and his spoken rulings. So, I mean, even that's a monster stanza to go over. But it opens with so much joy, so much singing, so much celebration, calling for people to come in to his place, his holiness, and be able to soak it in, basically, is the way we would phrase it. Soak it in. Just sit there and then let your mind think of all the beauty, the power, the love, the mercy, let your heart get overwhelmed with just how amazing and good he is, right? And then there's this, remember his wonders, and then remember his rulings, because they go together. You can't separate them. You remember his law, his rulings, and that's where all these blessings come from. You're going to see things clearly. You're going to see his signs and wonders where other people don't see anything.
Okay, you've been listening to Ramblings Around the Kitchen Table. This was Psalm 105 with Rabbi Andrew and rebbetzin Kelly. Shalom, everybody.